The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 3, Einir. Chapter 31. The noise of the fighting spirit shadows and the still-sounding wakener faded. The light dimmed. Tal stared down at the still form of his little brother from far away, his eyes fixed, unable to blink. Behind him, the two storm shepherds roared as the hug thing split in half with a horrible squeal. Then Adris and Odris stood on the halves and ripped them into quarters, and then into smaller and smaller fragments of shadow. All these pieces flopped and rolled about the floor, unable to get a grip or do anything. A few tried to join together, only to be ripped even smaller by the furious storm shepherds and the tiny bits stuffed into cracks in the walls. The Wakener kept on blasting its single note every few seconds. In the silence between the blasts, shouts could be heard, close by. Orders being shouted. Not the surprised response of ordinary chosen. Mila knelt by Gref. "He's dead, Mila," Tal said slowly. "He's dead." Mila quickly touched Gref's throat, 2 fingers feeling under his jaw. She kept them there while she spoke urgently to Tal. "There are guards coming up the south and east corridors." Tal didn't answer. He had totally and utterly failed. Gref's life was the price of his failure. "We'll have to try the west corridor and fight our way out if we must," Mila declared. "Now, before they gather their full strength." I can't leave Gref here," said Tal dully. He couldn't think what he had to do, but he couldn't just run away. Mila suddenly bent closer to Gref and pushed her fingers in harder. "He's not dead." Tal couldn't believe what he was hearing. "He's not dead," Mila repeated. "He's sick. Or poisoned. Come on." Tal bent down and tried to pick Gref up, but his leg gave way. Mila had already turned to leave, but she looked back and shouted, "Get Adris to carry him, you idiot! Ready your sunstone to fight!" "Be careful with him," Tal instructed Adris. "Very careful." Adris cradled the boy gently and ducked down to go through the door. As he bent down, lights suddenly flared all around the doorway and on Gref's wrist. The storm shepherd staggered back and looked at Tal.
"I can't go through,"
the storm shepherd said.
"Something is stopping me."
Tal saw what it was. There was a bracelet on Gref's wrist, a bracelet set with sunstones. He looked at it carefully. The sunstones were all quite small, and they had been especially put together to create a particular effect. Gref was obviously in a more secure prison than Tal had imagined. Unless he could get the bracelet off, and it was a single piece, or deactivate the spell, Gref was trapped there. Mila looked back in to see what was holding them up. "Come on," she said. "There are guards in the west corridor now. We have to attack and punch through." "I can't get Gref out," shouted Tal. "Then leave him." Tal looked at the sunstones set into the doorway. There were 6 of them, all welded deep into the stone. He'd have to pry all 6 out to annul the spell. It would take too long. "Put him down," Tal said, though he choked saying it. He pointed, carefully. Adris put Gref back down in the corner. "Go," said Tal. But Tal lingered a moment. He raised his sunstone ring, and a hot blue ray sprang out. It cut into the stone, and with a few decisive movements, Tal carved his name on the wall in letters a stretch high. It was a message for Gref, in case he woke up. Tal was leaving him now, but he would be back. Out in the hall, Mila was already running for the western corridor entrance, with Adris close behind her. Adris roared out a challenge to the spirit shadows that were spilling out from the eastern and southern corridors, their chosen masters close behind them.
"Die, little shadows!"
roared Adris. Shadow lightning flickered from his hands, and he stretched himself to be more than 14 stretches high. For a moment, even Tal was scared, and he understood why the guards were approaching slowly. None of them, or their spirit shadows, wanted to be the first to tangle with whatever Adris was. To make them even less eager, Tal raised his sunstone and concentrated on it. Red light flared in its depths, and Tal coaxed it to the surface. Then he screamed a war cry and thrust out his hand. Triple red rays of destruction shot out from the stones, slicing across the darkness of the hall, weaving together and then apart, striking stone, shadow, and flesh. Sparks shot from stone, scraps of shadow flew, and guards shouted in sudden pain. Tal ran as answering rays shot out. He was already looking away when a shockingly brilliant white light flashed and he felt its heat on his face.
Strong!
Boomed Adris, who was running at his side.
Again! Give me light!
Ahead, Mila's sword left a trail of luminescent after-images as she cut at the two guards who blocked her way. Audris grappled with their thin-waisted spirit shadows, holding one off with a raised foot as she gripped the other and twisted as if she were winding up a top. Then all four of them were in the western corridor, and there was no one ahead. Shouts and cries and the call of the Wakener dimmed behind them as they ran and ran. "Which way?" Mila shouted as they came to the first intersection. A guard stepped out and was instantly bowled over by Adris, and her spirit shadow flattened by a two-fisted punch from Audris. "Not that way!" yelled Tal, as he saw more guards coming out from the left. He turned and saw yet another squad coming from the right. There was only straight ahead, and they were running again as Tal desperately tried to remember the Codex's map. He didn't know the White Rooms, and he was already a bit lost. Besides, where could they run to? "Guards ahead!" shouted Mila as they came to another intersection, a three-way fork in the corridor. Tal stopped and stared. There were guards ahead, but that was not the worst of it. Safely behind the first rank was the ponderous body of Shadowmaster Sushin, wrapped in the robes of the Deputy Luminor of the Orange Order. He had his hideous fanged monster of a new spirit shadow at his side. Sushin saw Tal at the same time. Despite his fleshy arms, his reflexes were quicker than the boy's. His hand flashed up, and a ball of orange light flashed out, screeching across the 40 stretches between them. Adris tried to bat it away, but the ball went straight through his palm, without seeming to touch the shadow flesh. It struck Tal as he was raising his own sunstone, desperately summoning a blue shield from its sparkling depths. He was too late. The shield formed as the ball exploded around his head. Tal felt burning fire in his eyes. He screamed and fell back, twisting his hands into what he imagined were blackened sockets. "Blind!" he screamed. "I'm blind!" Sushin laughed, and the guards and his own spirit shadow charged forward. The laughter stopped suddenly as Mila threw her Merwin horn sword. It arced through the air like a golden lightning bolt and hit Sushin's left shoulder, the point sticking out his back. He stared open-mouthed at it. The guards and his spirit shadow stopped and looked back. Sushin closed his mouth. A smile started to spread across his bloated face. Then he started to laugh again. It was the laugh that made Mila decide to run. She knew she'd missed his heart, that it wasn't a killing blow, but no normal man could take such a wound and laugh. Tal had described Sushin to her, and she had heard his fear. Now she felt it, too. This was no normal chosen. His laugh made her feel cold inside, colder than the ice.